Hello everyone, DM Dux here, and today we'll be reviewing Fantasy Grounds Unity, an advanced virtual tabletop, digital reference collection, and source of automation for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and many other role-playing games. So to start, who is Fantasy Grounds for? Fantasy Grounds is for groups that are looking to automate combat and don't mind putting in some additional work to get things set up. Also great for DMs who want to include some note-taking and world building integrated into the virtual tabletop experience. It's also ideal for DMs looking to use and share digital content without needing a secondary subscription like through something like D&D Beyond. It's also ideal for DMs who are looking to buy and run digital published modules, as they require virtually no additional preparation. Now, who is Fantasy Grounds not for? Fantasy Grounds is not going to be great for groups who want a quick virtual tabletop, as even the most bare bones setup for Fantasy Grounds can still take some time to get rolling properly. I would also caution against using it for groups who are heavily invested into using D&D Beyond and potentially the Beyond 20 web extension to play on web-based tabletops such as Roll20, Astral Tabletop, or Owlbear Rodeo, as Fantasy Grounds Unity is unable to accept these kind of inputs. There is the ability to convert a D&D Beyond character into a XML sheet that Fantasy Grounds can read and generate a character from, but that is only one workaround. I'd also caution against groups that are using older, potentially outdated equipment like older laptops and desktops, as Fantasy Grounds Unity can be a little resource intensive depending on what's going on the screen. I can also say that Fantasy Grounds will not run on tablets or mobile devices. It is its own standalone program as opposed to a web page like some other virtual tabletops are, so it does not load or run properly on a system that can't load the program itself. And lastly, Fantasy Grounds is not going to be for groups that are looking for a free virtual tabletop solution, as any type of group play will require some monetary investment. If, however, you're able to look past or deal with all of these potential hurdles, then what awaits you is an extremely powerful virtual tabletop that I think will enhance the online tabletop experience. So, where do you get Fantasy Grounds? Well, there are two sources you can utilize. First is the Fantasy Grounds website itself, and you can also pick it up through Steam. And there are three versions of Fantasy Grounds. There's the demo license, the standard license, and the ultimate license. We're just going to go from the top down. So the ultimate is usually 150 USD for a one-time payment, or $10 for 3 months, and then $10 a month. And this allows you to host anyone that has a standard or demo license without limitation or issue. The next license is the standard license. This one is usually $40 for a one-time payment, or $4 a month. And this will allow you to host or join games for anyone else that has a standard license, as well as anyone that has an ultimate license. And then lastly is the demo license, the free version of Fantasy Grounds. This allows you to either run a solo game for yourself so you can experiment with the software, or join anyone that has an ultimate license. So, in a group of 5 individuals, for instance, if y'all wanted to play together, either one person, the DM, would need the ultimate license and host everyone using a demo account, or everyone can purchase a standard license, which will let them play with each other and anyone else that has a standard or ultimate license in the future. So let's say you've acquired your license and you are ready to go. After launching the program, creating and signing into your account, this is the screen you'll be presented with. Now, there are a few options. You can see you've got load, create, and join campaigns, options to tweak settings, updates, and then links to your user manuals and several other resources to provide you aid. We're not going to worry about any of this right now, though. We're just going to jump straight in. I'm going to click Join Campaign. You can see here we have the option to join cloud games, which the DM can choose to have their games listed publicly or not. If they are public, you can search them by GM name, find them, and join them directly. Or if they're private, you can also join by GM name. This will help prevent unwanted guests from interrupting on your session. But since I'm going to be doing a local game, you can see here I've already tested this once with the local host. So you can join by IP address and port, and this is what we'll be doing here. So if you're running Fantasy Grounds on your computer and want to join from a second instance, just do IP address localhost, or I can double click on this here, and we will join the game. Now what it's doing, acquiring the file list, essentially the way Fantasy Grounds works is when the DM begins their session, they're essentially hosting a server that contains all the data that they have, and they can choose which parts of it get quote-unquote uploaded to that server. When the other players connect, they'll download that data for their use while they're connected to the server. Now, the very first time you fire up Fantasy Grounds and join a game, you'll be presented with a screen similar to this. This is campaign setup, quick links to the user manual, wiki, as well as the forums. And if you've already seen this once and won't need it again, you can click this thing here to not show this the next time you load up. Click next, and this is where all the data modules live. Data modules are essentially packets of information that the DM loads at once, and then you as players will have the ability to load or unload that as needed. So we can click here on modules to see all available modules, and we have 3 available to us. We've got the basic rules, the SRD, and my homebrew character options, which is really just all the base character options, but I own the books physically, so I typed them all up so my players would have access to them. So we're just going to go ahead and load all this. So click on the load button, you can see it goes from a closed book to an open one. And once all that is loaded, you can close this out, hit next, and this takes us to the options tab, which can also be accessed up here on the cogwheel. And the only thing I'd recommend messing with right now is this auto center map. I would make sure that this is off, because what this does is every time a new person's turn comes up, it'll automatically center the map on that person, which can be a little jarring if you have a lot of fighters or a very big map. So that's all we're going to mess with for now. So we'll click finish, and that gets rid of the screen. We're now presented with our character selection. So if you've already made a character in a separate account, or have other options, you can click this blue arrow here to import your character and bring it in for you to play. Or if your DM has already made characters for you, they'll appear here. You can click on one and it will select and assign you that character. Since we don't have either of those options, we'll be making one brand new. And there are 2 options we can go through here. There's the character wizard, which is very convenient, but a little bit buggy, and it doesn't play nice with any type of homebrew content. So we're going to ignore that for now. Instead, we're going to hit this little green plus sign down here for add item. And so here's our character sheet. You can see we've got spots for our name, class, background, race, everything that'll make our character our character. Now if we go over here to the right side, we can see we've got our options to pick our background, class, race, spells, everything we'll need to build our character from the ground up. But we're going to start with the most fundamental aspect of character creation, the stats. Now we could go with array, but for the purposes of demonstration, we're going to use the roll 4d6 and drop the lowest method. And one way you can do that is to left click and drag the dice over the chat box. Right click to add more dice, then roll. And we can drop the 3, which will make that a 15. Now, if you want to have this automatically happen, what you can do is type /roll 4d6, and the K3 tells the system to keep the highest 3 dice rolls. And if you want to save this, you can just drag it, put it in the hotbar down there, and then just hit a button, and it'll automatically roll and drop the lowest one. Do that 4 more times to get our 6. Okay. Not bad. Now, before we assign any of that, we need to figure out what class are we going to be playing. So I think we'll be playing a bard. Bards are fun, very strong, well-designed class, and I just like them. So knowing we'll be playing a bard, we want to have a very high charisma stat. So we'll go ahead and, knowing this is a 15, we'll put that in there. Then the other 15 we'll put in dex. So now we have a 14. I know we'll put that in intelligence. We'll say they're relatively smart. And then we've got 2 12s and an 11 to place. So we'll put the 12s into Constitution, as well as Wisdom, and then the 11 in Strength. Not the strongest character around, but he's good. So now with our stats in place, we're actually going to add our background, then our race, then our class. The reason for this is so we can double check for skill overlap, since backgrounds usually only give you a very limited selection of skills, and then races afterwards, and then classes usually have the widest selection, few exceptions. It'll be easiest to prevent overlap by adding that order. So for a bard, I think an obvious choice is the entertainer background. So just drag and drop the entertainer there. And you can see over here, we've already had some stuff added. So now if we click our skills real quick, we can see acrobatics and performance are already done. Now let's add in character's race. Now I'm a big fan of half-elf bards, so that's what we'll be doing. So now we add the half-elf. You can see it adjusted our speed, gave us languages, size, dark vision, and now we get to choose 2 additional skills. You can see we've already got acrobatics and performance selected, so we'll go with 2 additional ones. Now what I feel like 2 that are always good to have, stealth and perception. To see and to not be seen. Always good to have. And now we can increase one of our ability scores by 1. So knowing that we have an odd number on our dexterity, I feel like dexterity is a very good choice here. And you know what? We will also increase our... Actually, we'll increase our strength and dexterity both by 1 just to bump these up to the next level. So after we hit OK, notice it automatically adjusts for it, which is fantastic. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to grab our class. And we're going to be playing the Bard. So drag and drop in here. And this is where it was important to add everything beforehand. Because this does not automatically deselect the skills we get to pick. The character wizard can do that, but the drag and drop method does not. So knowing the skills we already have here, we can pick the ones we don't. Now I think for Bard, obvious ones, Performance and Persuasion are 2 very good ones. And then we'll say Deception. And there we go. We have our skill proficiency set. And now let's say we're going to be starting at level 3. To level up your character, just click, drag, and drop. That's Bard 2. It adds a Jack of all trades, Song of Rest, and Magical Inspiration as the optional feature. And drag and drop one more time. And now we get to select our college or our Bard. This is the specialization. And we'll say for ease of use, we're just going to go College of Lore. So James Riete, our half-elf bard, is ready to go. So as I mentioned earlier, the skills here, this tells us what skills we have proficiency with. If you need to add a custom skill, like for example, any tools or other unique skills your DM may assign you, just hit the plus button here, and it will add one down there. Now abilities, this is where it is a running list of everything you get from your class, race, background, and all that jazz, as well as feats. So we can click on these individual icons here to see what these abilities do. And these will come important later. Actually, one thing we can go ahead and set right now, notice Jack of all trades gives us half our proficiency bonus to any ability check you make that doesn't already include the bonus. So we go up here to our skills, we can click on the star, that gives us proficiency. There's double proficiency, aka expertise, or half proficiency. So we can go ahead and set every other skill we are not proficient with to our half proficiency. Alright, through the magic of editing, that happened in a blink of an eye. So now all of our skills that we're not proficient in have our half proficiency. Jack of all trades is done. Now if you also notice, bonus proficiencies for lore, we gain 3 additional skill proficiencies of our choice, as well as expertise. So we'll go ahead and take our bonus proficiencies first. So 3 additional skills of our choice we now have proficiency with. So we'll go ahead and, given that we're a spellcaster, we'll give us Arcana, as well as History. Going in hand in hand with our Deception, will give us Sleight of Hand as well. But now we get Expertise here. So we get 2 of our skill proficiencies doubled. I think a very obvious choice here for our Bard. Persuasion, double proficiency, so you see we get a massive bonus here. And we'll also say Perception, why not? So now we have our expertise set and ready to go. The rest of this we'll get into later, but you can see we also have our traits here for Fey Ancestry, our skill versatility, and this is mostly just a list of abilities we have. So one interesting thing to note is our languages down here. So Fantasy Grounds actually has languages programmed into it, where if the GM types a message in a particular language, you can see that's put out in common, so everyone can read that. However, if, for example, we were to type something in Elvish, you can see it gives us the Elven script for it, and if we have the language assigned to us, it will give us the translation. Whereas if I were to put something out in, say, Dwarvish, which we currently do not have, we don't see that. But now, if this choice language of ours becomes Dwarvish, and the GM tries to speak again in Dwarvish, we now can see it just fine. Alright, so with the abilities taken care of for now, we'll next move on to inventory. Notice we have spots for equipment, treasure, as well as our encumbrance. So let's go back to our Bard. So we can go back to the main page, click on this magnifying icon, which will tell us, what levels we have, the hit dice they provide us. And we can click on this little icon here to bring up the Bard as a class. We'll expand this out for a moment. So we can look and see the equipment we start with. Now to find this, we'll open the campaign sidebar here, click on items. Now you can see we've got every piece of equipment in the basic rules and SRD loaded up. So now we can just search for all of our equipment. And through the magic of editing, we're going to make it all appear now. Oh, and all of a sudden our items are all here. It's magic. So if you notice, all of these items have a weight to them and have been added to our encumbrance. So if your DM uses this rule, it's a very easy way to track how much stuff your character is carrying. Notice we've also included our 15 gold pieces here. Now, the way the items are worked, there's a carried and equipped status. Anything that has this bag on it is carried. Anything that has the shirt looking icon is equipped. So if you notice, the dagger, the leather armor, and the rapier are already equipped, which we'll get to shortly. If you want to organize this a bit better, one thing you can do is put items under others. So we have this backpack, for example. Well, our bedroll is obviously not being carried all the time, so we can set it in the backpack. and it will automatically fill where it's at. And if we hit tab, it automatically sets it under that. So now we can go through and add everything that we are not currently using to the backpack. And then if we just hit tab, it automatically reorganizes it so everything is set under the backpack. Very useful if, for example, your character has a bag of holding, or they have, some other secondary container that you want to keep track of items in. And in addition, with everything under the backpack, if you drop it, notice it took all the weight off because everything is included under this backpack. So with our inventory set, we can now go down the next bit, which is notes. This is where you can add basically just any notes about your character. If you so choose to roll on the random tables provided for your background, you can do so. And this is where you would note the results. The log is mostly used for more official play, or if you just want to keep, adventure logs about what you do when you do it, this is a good way to do it. And last but certainly not least is the actions tab. This is where all the meat and potatoes of Fantasy Grounds happens. As you can see, we already have the weapons included here. We've got dagger, our melee attack, as well as the thrown attack, and our rapier. Now, anytime it reads that there's a thrown weapon, it gives us an ammo counter. And since we only have one dagger, I'll just put it at 1. That way we know if we've thrown our dagger or not. If you ever have any questions about what a weapon does, you can again click the button over here, and it will bring up that weapons tab and tells you what it does. So now if you notice, we have our spell slots already in place, because again, the game knows we are a full spellcaster, so it knows our spellcasting slot progression. And we have an option to drag in all of our spells. So we go back to our bard here. We can see we should know 2 cantrips and 6 total spells, with the potential for one of them being a 2nd level spell. So let's go ahead and add our spells in, shall we? So we open up our spells tab here. We can chunk it down to bard spells, and we can sort them by level. So let's go ahead and grab our level 2 spell, shall we? So like we've done many times before, drag and drop it. And look at that, it already has created spells level 2. Gives us the 3d8 thunder with the con save. And again, because the game is smart enough, it knows if we look here, it is using charisma as our basis for everything. Now let's look at our level 1 spells. We can get 5 of these. So we'll go ahead and grab Cure Wounds, again drag and drop, and notice it creates yet another category for our level 1 spells. It will automatically sort them by spell level, so you never have to question, well, what's the minimum spell slot I need to cast this? There's Cure Wounds. We'll go with Charm Person as well. And last but not least, let's pick out our 2 cantrips. And just like that, our character spells are done and ready to rock and roll. Now the only thing we have left is to add some of our characters' class and race abilities. So again, if we go back up here to abilities, and so we've got our Bardic Inspiration. We'll go ahead and drag that off to the side to save. We've got our Cunning Words, Song of Rest, and then the Half-Elf doesn't actually really have any active abilities per se. So this is all we really need to have currently. Now let's go back down to our actions. We can just drag these in here. Again, once we exit off these, we can just click this button here and it'll tell us, bring us a little pop-up that tells us what they do. So let's start with Song of Rest. So at 2nd level, you can use your music to basically, during a short rest, allow a creature to heal an extra 1d6 HP. So in order to make this work, what we'll do is we will right-click to open up this cogwheel, go to Add Action. We're going to add a healing effect to it. And this opens up a box for us to make healing. So we're going to say Who is it going to? It's going to be whoever we target because it's for other people. They're going to get HP instead of temporary HP, and they get additional 1d6. So we just grab the d6 here, drag it, drop it, and we're good to go. Now, cutting words. Cutting words are bardic inspiration due to how complicated they are, and it's a situational thing. The game unfortunately cannot automate it fully because it won't know exactly what we want to do at the time. However, we can still set it up to work very well for us. So cutting words allows you to make a use of your bardic inspiration to enforce a penalty on a creature's attack, check, or damage roll. So the easiest way to set this up is we'll go once again right click, add action, but this time we will add an effect. Now the effects are very cool because you can actually put any of the previous effects, so damage, healing, you can inflict conditions with effects as well. But since this one is just a flat d6 penalty, we're going to say cutting words as a description and then minus a d6. And this is more a note to us about what the cutting words does. So minus d6. And whenever we upgrade our bardic inspiration die, we can update this as well. So similarly, we'll look at bardic inspiration here. Again, it lasts 10 minutes, and so bardic inspiration die the d6. So we'll go to a similar path here. Click on magnifying glass again. We'll say inspired 1d6. It lasts for 10 minutes. Now this is really nice because, as you'll see later, we can actually drag this effect onto someone. That way they will always remember they're inspired, and then they can remove it once they actually use the inspiration. Makes it very easy to keep track of. But now there's a little wrinkle. You know, bardic inspiration and cunning words both run off of the amount of bardic inspiration you have. And you get your charisma modifier, and you regain them on a long rest. Song of Rest is not like that. You just have it all the time. So, in order to set this up to properly have a limited resource, we're going to need to make a brand new power selection. So while we're in group display, which you can change down here, notice these are all spells. We're going to take this and we're going to change it to Bardic Inspiration, and watch, when I hit tab, it creates another group for that. So now this is important because if I hit this little magnifying glass here over Bardic Inspiration, I can set up their shared uses, which is our charisma modifier. We go back here, we see is currently 3. So we're going to set this up for 3 uses daily. We don't have to worry about anything else right now. But now, if we use a Bardic Inspiration, it ticks off, and you notice it's tracking how many we've used throughout the day. And whenever we take a long rest, it'll reset if we've used them all. This is very useful for setting up groups of abilities that happen to share the same resource. Now, with all this out of the way, we're going to change this over to the actions, as this is the version of the character sheet you'll utilize the most. So the actions, this gives you the direct effects, so you can click these or drag and drop them to apply their effects. So say you cast Cure Wounds on someone, for example, you can just drag and drop this and it will automatically roll the healing and apply it to them, which we'll show off in a little bit. So now, our character is, for all intents and purposes, done. Only thing we have left is to add a portrait. Now, in order to add a portrait, we'll go over here to Library, open up the assets. Now you can see we have nothing currently, but if you ever wanted to include your own custom assets, you could hit the folder button down here. That will open up the directory on your computer to where you can drag and drop images, hit the refresh button, and they will appear here on the assets window. But for now, for purposes of ease, we're just going to have the DM give me a picture right about now. And we have a character token. Huzzah. So it's time for combat. First thing you need to make sure is to have your combat tracker open. Make sure you are in the combat tracker, which your DM will be able to add you into it. You can see we're in here, as are the rest of the members of our illustrious party. Now the DM will be able to share their combat map, which they will do now. So it starts off kind of small. Make sure to hit this arrow to upsize it so you can see it a bit better. Scroll in, and you can see here's us and our party members. You can see the walls are currently blocking our line of sight, so we can't really see everything going on right now. Let's just say our party members begin to edge forward, as we do as well, and all of a sudden they come upon some ruffians. So they move in here. So you also scooch in. Time to roll initiative. So we're going to go ahead and just reposition these guys a little bit. The cleric is right here, and you're right here. Yeah, it seems like a good spot. Now, time for everyone to roll initiative. So, two ways to do this. Either the DM can roll for everyone's initiative, which he's going to do now. Or if you want to roll your own, what you'll do is open up your character sheet, and you can either drag and drop the die or double click the number to roll your own initiative. And there you go, that puts you at the top of the order. Then when combat begins, just hit the little button here, and it is now your turn. So here's where all the fun effects come into play. So let's say you want to hit one of these guys with some vicious mockery. Say Acolyte number 3, since they are giving your cleric a bit of trouble. So there are a few ways you can do this. You can control click, and it'll target that creature. As you can see now, your target is Acolyte 3. Or if you don't want to control click, you can just drag and drop the effect onto it. But vicious mockery. So with this thing targeted, you just have to click the button, and it automatically forces the saving throw, which you can see failure. So now you can click this button to deal the 1d4 psychic damage, which you rolled a 4 on. And per part of vicious mockery, they now have disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of its turn. And then we'll say you can give out one of your bardic inspiration. So you can tick off one of those. I will say you even go so far as to drop the inspiration on your cleric as well. And literally just drag and drop it. And now the cleric has the effect of being inspired. That's it for your turn. Hit the little turn complete, and it'll pass it off to the enemies. You can see after hitting that button, it is now showing it is the Acolyte's turn. But for now, we're going to skip past all this, and we're actually going to transition over to the DM screen. That way you can see everything else the characters are doing. So this is the DM's version. You can see I'm seeing a little bit more than what you were. But for the purposes of this, we're going to jump down to the rogue's turn. You can see on their character sheet, they've also got all their things in order. But notice here, we've got a few different options. We're going to move this over for a bit. So they're going to take steady aim, which will allow them to stay in place to get advantage on their attack. And they're going to try to attack Acolyte number 1. Now, we can go down here to the modifiers, click ADV for advantage, and it will automatically apply advantage to the next roll we do, which in this case is going to be with our short bow. So we drag it, and notice it automatically ticked up the ammo counter onto Acolyte 1. Ooh, natural 20. Thank you, Fantasy Rounds, for showing me what all this will do. So now this is very nice. Because it knows the last attack was a crit, it is automatically going to double any damage dice we roll. and that includes sneak attack. So we're going to click this button here. You can see it's dealing 2d6 additional damage on the next roll. The self tag means that it automatically applies to ourselves. So we click this, so that effect is now applied to us, and we're going to roll for our short bow damage and watch what happens here. It doubled all the extra. So you can now see we have the original d6 for damage, the additional 2d6 for sneak attack damage, and then it doubled every d6 we rolled, so it rolled them again for a total of 26 damage off of a single hit. Rogues. But if you notice, it immediately said damage exceeds hit points by 17, instant death. So this one is now dead. If we actually look at the combat tracker, I now have the option to immediately remove them from the field, because they are super dead. And then it's Barry the Barbarian's turn. Now he's feeling angry and impressed, so he is going to shift over here. And if we bring up his character sheet now, we can see he's got quite a few options here. So first he's going to rage. So we tick off one use of rage. And we just click this button here and it automatically will give us resistance. So half damage against normal bludgeoning, slashing, piercing with a duration of 10 for a minute, essentially. And it's going to give us our advantage on strength checks and saves, as well as 2 additional damage to any damage roll that has the melee modifier attached to it. And just to show how crazy and convoluted this can get, we're going to Reckless Great Weapon Master attack this last one. So we again click the button here, Reckless Attack. This tells us what's giving us these particular effects. So this gives us advantage on melee attacks, but also will grant advantage on attacks to hit us. And then Great Weapon Master gives us a straight up -5 to hit with an additional 10 damage should we hit. So we're going to Great Axe this guy. And again, notice how it did all this calculation for us. And Great Axe, so it dropped the 13, took the -5, which essentially negated our damage bonus with a raw 18 to hit, and it'll do that. So now we roll the damage. And note, 22 total because it was 7 plus the 15 because it knew to add the additional 10 from our Great Weapon Master. And notice that now the Great Weapon Master status doesn't go away because we don't have an expend, because it only gets taken out if we hit. So we gotta manually delete that. But that acolyte is also now very much dead. But just for funsies, so you can see what it would do, we're going to bring up the acolyte number 5, bring up his. Now just watch what happens here. He's going to go with a club attack roll against our friend. Notice it is automatically at advantage because of that reckless. So it hits. It's going to deal a d4 bludgeoning damage, but again, watch this. It partially resisted. So it rolled a 2, and it got half to 1. So this thing dealt 1 point of damage to our lovely barbarian friend here. Not really doing a whole lot. And next is Wittick the Wizard. Now Wittick is tired of all these acolytes already, so he's going to move over just a little bit. And he's got a very nice spell in the form of Burning Hands. Now, Burning Hands is a 15-foot cone. So what we can do is we can hold Alt, then right and left click at the same time to draw out a 15-foot cone. And I'd say that very obviously hits both of these acolytes. So we can right and left click just once to get rid of that little angle. Now we control click to target both of these guys, and we hit one button for Burning Hands, 2 and a 1, so they both failed. Or again, alternatively, we could drag and drop this onto each individual one. But I find for multi-targeting, this is a lot faster. And since they both failed, they both take the full amount of damage. You can see 8 to Acolyte 3 and Acolyte 4. They are not doing super great. Acolyte 3 is now dead, courtesy of the additional damage from Vicious Mockery earlier. And then we can control click to untarget. And now we're down to our Cleric's turn. And we're going to say that the battle is going in Yellow's favor, but they don't 100% know that. So the Cleric's going to do what Cleric's going to do, and they're going to cast Bless. Now, Bless is a really cool spell, but I know many people will forget. Who's blessed? How long is it up for? This takes care of all of that. Because all you have to do is, while they're selected, target the characters you're going to bless. In this case, our Wizard, you, and the Rogue. Click the 1 button, and now all 3 of you are blessed. So which means the next time you go for an attack, check, or save, you will have that D4 automatically added to you. But let's say the Acolyte sees this, is not having any of it. They're going to run up and they're going to hit her with the club. Deals the D4 bludgeoning damage. Well, watch this. It automatically rolls the Constitution saving throw for the Cleric to see if they maintain their concentration or not. It knows what the DC should be. And if we look at our lovely Cleric here, you notice they have Warcaster. The game knows to read Warcaster and automatically rolled with advantage. So again, incredibly powerful automation that takes a lot of the tedious bookkeeping out of combat. And we'll say they're done with that. It's now up to round 2. And if we go down here to our Barbarian, notice they still have the Reckless attack. We're just going to jump down to them real quick. Notice now that effect went away because it will automatically kick down as it goes. Well, we're going to jump back up to you for a moment, Mr. James. Let's say you're feeling pretty confident about this, so you're going to go in and you're going to make an attack. So watch what happens here. So you've got our dagger, right? You're going to roll to hit this guy. And look, it automatically adds the D4 to it, which is nice. Extra damage there. And I find the drag and drop method just easiest to do. Alright, and they are not looking super fantastic. Celia's been hurt, just a little bit. If you notice, the wounds up here are slowly ticking up. But Barry's been hurt, Celia's been hurt. So let's say instead of that, you wanted to cast Cure Wounds on Celia. So you run up, you're like, I got you. So again, you can either control, click, or just drag and drop. But drag and drop the Cure Wounds, and the game knows to automatically heal her, and she's back up to full health. It's amazing. The battle continues, and eventually you find yourselves all victorious. We'll go ahead and tracker, get rid of the enemies here, reset initiative, and let's say you've burned some resources. You can see here one of your bardic inspiration is gone. We'll say you cast one of your spells. Through the power of the DM, they decide to take a rest here. Let's say they take a long rest. You get your abilities back. Game knows what comes back on a long rest and a short rest because you said it earlier, and will automatically do that for you. With combat complete, victory is yours. You go to rummage around the shrine to see what they have. As you step inside, if you notice, everything is all of a sudden grayscaled for you. It's because Fantasy Grounds knows what Dark Vision is and can follow it appropriately. If we also go to someone like Widdick, for example, our Dragonborn, they can't see diddly squat in here just because they don't have any Dark Vision. But let's say you, being the kind soul you are, decide to cast Light on something they were holding. All of a sudden, they can now see, and your vision, again, while unaffected, if you notice now, is colorized in the area of the light. makes it much easier for others to come in and see what they got going on. So let's say you rummage through and go to a door opener here. Whittick, our buddy, is out just doing wizard things. He comes in and illuminates everything. You'll have a jolly good time and eventually find all your loot. So as the DM, what I have access to, if I go down here to parcels, and see I've got shrine rewards here. This can be a certain amount of gold, certain items, all this, that, and the other. And if we open up the party sheet here, and drag and drop, and it automatically populates everything we have going on. Now this is a part of the sheet normally only I can see. We go over here to your view. You'll notice you don't have quite as many additional options as I have, but as the DM, I have the ability to assign certain items to characters. So if we go back to our version of the screen, and see, let's say the bag of holding gets claimed by Whittick. Let's say deck of illusions, Rizit wants it. And the potion of healing, let's say that'll go to Celia the cleric. Easy enough. Then we hit this, the chunk, and you can see everyone gets an even share of the gold, with 2 more sitting just kind of in the parcel. And then why did this not get assigned? Well, Barry's gonna get it then. Now we do that. If we go back over to the parcel view for you, notice all that is now gone. But from the DM side, this is a very, very easy way to give out treasure, and we as a DM, we can see everything everyone is carrying. Makes it quite easy to manage all that. And then one of the other shared tabs we get is this nice little watch order, as well as a marching formation, because there's a improvised battle mat and a way to set up marching order and watch order if needed. That is Fantasy Grounds in a nutshell. There are some more in-depth options to explore from the DM side of thing, but we'll get into that in another video, as this one has already run on for far longer than I anticipated. But that'll do it for me. Until next time, have a good one.